When you heard the words of the president, both in the ones directly to you and your House colleagues and in the press conference after, do you have a sense of clarity as to when exactly this conflict is going to be wrapped up and what we will have achieved at the end of it, what we still may have yet to achieve?
Yeah, Kaylee, great to be with you. The president is taking the information day by day that comes in. One of the things that we all know and are seeing is that our military is performing just incredibly. And the fact that, the intelligence that was gathered on the front end gave our military the ability to go in and take out the Iranian assets at the pace that they did is truly remarkable. And, I think for us as Americans, our attention span can be very short, and we want these things to happen quickly, just like, with the Maduro case where our military was in and out overnight was incredible. But, we have to realize that these things do take some time and that this is going to be a long-term situation that is going to have to be dealt with. And I think President Trump is handling it.
How long is long-term, Congressman?
Well, I think we're going to operate as quickly as possible. We want to destroy the assets, and we want to see that the Iranian regime is decimated. And, as was said earlier on the program, that, the other side has a vote in this. I think that they're going to continue to, use their propaganda to try to drag this out as long as they can, like they always do. But in reality, I think we know that this is going to be a shorter situation. The mission is already mostly accomplished, but of course the transition and the changes over there still have to be made. My hope is the Iranian people really step up, and they're the ones that start to make the changes in the government that need to be made with the support of a coalition that has really come together very strong in the Middle East and here at home.
Well, I guess to your point, Congressman, and it's good to have you back. Thanks for joining us. I know it's a gorgeous day in Miami right now. That research coming from Rapidan Energy would suggest that we could be in for a lot more of this. U.S. military operations, Rapidan writes, have not yet meaningfully degraded Iran's ability to disrupt Strait of Hormuz traffic and are likely to do so for several weeks. This updated disruption outlook indicates that barring a ceasefire and the resumption of Hormuz flows, crude oil could get back into the mid-100s, kind of like we saw in the panic that brought us to $120 almost yesterday morning. How worried are you that we actually have not seen the worst of this yet?
Well, I think there's definitely concern, and there's natural concern. I mean, who wants to take the risk of traveling through there right now? But it was just announced that President Trump just put together a $20 billion underwriting insurance program and is telling these ship operators and these shipping companies to move and to continue to operate, and that we've taken care of the Navy, the Iranian Navy, that they're no longer a threat. Of course, China wants to see activity. Most buyers and sellers of the almost 20% of the oil and gas that comes out of the Persian Gulf area and through the Straits of Hormuz is able to move. And so I think that President Trump, who is a businessman, knows that while there is instability with the military attacking Iran, that it does create uncertainty, but by coming back on the backside with an insurance program and confidence, saying that they can move, hopefully will make a difference. So I think really, to Kaylee's question earlier, I think within a month from now, we're going to have a very different conversation.
Well, as we consider the Strait of Hormuz, it is worth noting that the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, actually just posted on X that President Trump is, in his words, maintaining stability of global energy during these military operations against Iran. He says the U.S. Navy successfully escorted an oil tanker through the Strait of Hormuz to ensure oil remains flowing to the global market. So when we consider that escort, Congressman, and you mentioned also the insurance underwriting, that's billions of dollars as well. All of this comes at a cost via military resources or others, which raises the question, and given your seat on the Budget Committee, I'll pose it to you, how we're going to pay for this, if we need more funding to pay for this, and whether that's going to come through just a supplemental bill or maybe a second reconciliation package.
Well, it could probably come through either one of those. It depends on what the needs are. A reconciliation bill is going to move, but it's going to probably take time. Now, one thing that we have seen is that getting things through the Senate, sometimes you have to package them together, like we did with the one big beautiful bill. There may have to be a second big beautiful bill to be able to move through. But if it's a supplemental, I think that there will also be strong Republican support. And I think that the fact is that President Trump he moves quickly. He wants to find solutions and get things moving without as little disruption as possible. But as we all know, that the markets get scared, people don't want to take the risks, and so there is going to be a price to pay for that. So I would answer that with stability there comes a price. It's much easier for terrorists to shoot a $2,000 rocket when we have to have a $200,000 rocket to respond to it, to knock it out of the sky. So safety and security does come with a price tag. And I think that that's why it's important to do this now before we ever gave Iran a chance to have a nuclear weapon, and they would be leveraging the West from here for eternity.
I'd love to ask you about the messaging conversations that you're having at the retreat, Congressman. But just quickly, do you expect that supplemental request from the White House this week, as some had reported?
I don't know if it'll be this week. I think they're probably still analyzing a bit. But you know what? They may have the numbers that come from the Department of War. They have a pretty good idea of what the daily costs are. But I think that, I would suspect maybe over the weekend or the request comes, and then we'll have to take it up next week when we get back to Washington. But I think that there's a lot of positivity around the actions, the mission that has been accomplished in Iran. Just watching the Iranian people here in America, the Iranian Americans that are celebrating because this regime is being changed. I don't have any problem saying that there needs to be a change in regime in Iran, and the fact that we have taken out the military capabilities that they've had, the nuclear capabilities that they were working on, giving the Iranian people a chance. I think that the Iranian people are the real difference makers here that are going to really guide the direction of Iran. Just like I said, the same thing with Syria. And Syria is making a good move in the right direction. So having opportunity for the people will produce good results, I hope.
Well, we're covering the globe here, and I want to ask you about the Ayatollah's son now, Congressman, and that's the issue. We've now talked for about 10 minutes, and we haven't brought up the issue of affordability. In our remaining moment, are you having conversations there? Is there a plan for members like yourself and the Republican conference to message around this war when it comes to affordability in America?
Yeah, Noel, that's exactly right. Things here at home are getting better. Inflation is down. Of course, what we passed in the Big Beautiful Bill addresses the tax policy that is now going to benefit Americans. We're just coming into tax season, and the Treasury Secretary is doing a phenomenal job of communicating what is happening, and that people are seeing more money being left in their pockets rather than going to pay the federal government's spending sprees over the last several years. When people have more money in their pockets, that's going to spur on the economy. As I was just talking to some sales folks back home, they don't see the urgency yet, but they are starting to see that people are just kind of building up and ready to make moves here over the summer. So I think, again, this summer we'll see a much more active market.